Hello, everyone. I'm Angela Merola. I'm a business coach, speaker, educator for interior designers, architects, and creative entrepreneurs. And I'm here to bring this podcast for you today around financial advisors and tips on how it can help you run your business easier, give you more time, less stress. I just want to introduce to you Greg McDonough from Blackburn Cap. He's a financial advisor, financial coach. And he does work with several of my clients. They've had exceptional results and what I call up leveling their business. And he's made their lives so much better. And I originally did this podcast after testing my sound twice, but the sound did not come through for me. So I am re-recording my part. And I want to keep the content with Greg because it's such exceptional content and I want to share it with you. He has a quote on his website that I think kind of really captures what a financial advisor does. Get a guide on your side to give you the insight, options, and clarity so you can say yes to the right opportunities. And I love that quote because what I notice is people who have financial advisors, it's an up level to their business and they have clarity, they have insight, and they have greater options for their business. Welcome, Greg. I'm so glad we got to do this. There's two reasons why I wanted to do this podcast for our listeners. The first one is that in working with my clients, I see a significant difference in the level of business that they have for the people who use a financial advisor and the people who don't use a financial advisor. I want to open the door to the possibilities of how that can up level their business and see for themselves what it might be like to work with someone like that. The second reason is that when I'm working with people, just kind of across the board, anytime we're talking about money, we're talking about the finances of our business, it's a fear and some anxiety about opening the door of showing that and having someone help manage that for us around, trust and vulnerability and control. Because business owners tend to, especially creative ones, tend to know a little bit less about the financial side and how to manage a business from the financial side versus the creative side, because that's why creatives get into this business. So I want to give some level of comfort and some tips and some understanding of what that's like, and the fact that they can have a lot more control than they think, and it feels a lot better than they might imagine. And so that's my first question. What are the things that you do to help ease the anxiety, ease the fear, and ease that vulnerability and sort of build that trust between you and your clients?
Yeah, that's a great question, Angela, and it's wonderful to be here. And it is ironic that we both find ourselves in this interior design space. In fact, my house right now is being painted from top to bottom, our interior, and so I feel like I'm in the space and I'm supporting the space. So, that question's a great question, and I think like any relationship, it and building trust, it comes down to small steps. And so what I do and work with my clients is usually right out of the gate when we're just meeting each other. It's, hey, let's figure out something small that I can help you with, and it could be a review of the financial numbers. It could be an analysis of their history. It could be just some open business conversations around what you're doing and trying to get out of the business, out of your life, those types of things. So back to the coaching mentality. And then from there, I hope that the relationship grows, the trust grows, and it gets to a point where I'm truly that trusted advisor. And I've got clients that I've got access to their checkbook, right? And that's a pretty scary concept. In fact, I had a client 2 weeks ago hand me a blank check that was signed and say, whatever we need to fill this out to be, just fill it out and send it off. And so that's a trusted relationship. But that didn't happen overnight. That's not filling out a contact form on a website, and next thing you know, you've got this trusted relationship. So again, my advice would be, on that perspective, from a finance perspective, is try to find something smaller, less dangerous than giving them an open checkbook, just to test the relationship and get started. The number one question that I get at the beginning of a relationship or beginning of a conversation, hey, I had a profitable year and my income statement looks good, but I don't have any money left in the bank. There's a disconnect there, right? And that, to me, is sort of step one of my role of saying, hey, Angela, yeah, you made $10 last year, but do you realize that you've got $20 left in accounts receivable and you took a distribution of Y? So therefore, you're going to be at a disconnect between your income statement and your cash balance. So that's one. And then secondarily to that, and sort of related, is, are there items on your balance sheet? I know we're getting more technical as we go on, but that's what we do. Are there items and accounts on your balance sheet that are stale? So for example, you might have an accounts receivable sitting on your balance sheet that is a year old. Well, really, that's just overstated revenue, because you're not going to collect it now. And so truly, what your income statement is telling you is not a true story of your performance. And so back to your question, one of my initial steps with my clients is explaining that story, using your financial information in a way to articulate the history, to define your financial wealth, where you are right now. And then we start using that. Once we get the data right, we start using that data to make strategic business decisions. I've got a designer in mind that I've been working with now for 2 years. And when we started together, there are items in credit card accounts that she doesn't have a credit card for anymore. There are items that were liabilities that aren't liabilities. There are assets that aren't assets or needed to be depreciated. So there was a cleansing that needed to happen on the balance sheet in order to make the income statement make sense to me. And so that's the types of things that we look into. And so that when new data comes in and new financial performance happens, we can say, okay, there's no but that was this and this. Like, there's always tends to be, not always, there can be these side stories that related to your financial performance that ultimately end up as excuses of why the data is not telling us what it is. That's point one. And point two to that question, I'd say, is the timeliness. One of the things that I work very closely and passionately with my clients is that I want real-time data into your financial statements. So when I pull something up this week, it's last week's data. I don't want to wait to the 15th of the following month to analyze something that happened 45 days ago, because that's gone, right? And so I'm very much into kind of weekly reconciliations, understand your data, knowing what cash flow is coming in next week or the next 90 days, and those types of things.
That's a really good point, because the effect of knowing in real time the reality of the cash flow, what's coming in, what's going out, that gives people empowerment. It makes them feel comfortable. It gives them less stress. Like, I have clients who stay up awake at night because they're not exactly sure what their financial situation is. They have a feeling, they have a pulse on it. They think they know, they don't know the specific data and the time frame. So it gives people a better way of planning for the future. So I would have to say that my clients who have, let's say, a bookkeeper and a financial advisor, the bookkeeper is very transactional and gives them and does a lot of tasks and things like that, which you have to have. But the financial advisor is giving them a bigger picture of the financial wealth of the business.
That's right. That's exactly right. And I'll give you a specific example. And I'm a huge fan of Mike Michalowicz and his Profit First concepts. And his concept is, create bank accounts and put specific dollars in specific accounts every time money comes in. Now, the application of that can be not difficult, but it needs to be, for me, it needs to be a little bit more customized for the clients that I deal with. But I do use a Profit First methodology with many of my clients. And in particular, to your point, money comes into the account, a check comes in from a client, and we know out of that check, 70% of that is for client purchases. So we put that money into client purchases, and then we leave the rest in an overhead account or even in the incoming account. And I will allocate that into the owner's draw account and overhead account over a period of time. So that, and then I can forecast that out. So I could say, client, by the end of the year, you should have, with your current spending, you should have X amount of dollars in this account that's truly free and clear of all obligation. And that's where I think the risk is without having processes and systems, is you don't know what money you're spending. If you're spending client purchases money on overhead items, that's a no-no. And the only way to solve that is to get more revenue, but you're going to be in this never-ending cycle unless you come up with a system to get out of that cycle. And that's what I try to help my clients with, is say, okay, this is your profit out of that project. This is a period of time it's going to go out over. Let's forecast that out. We know where our spending is. Where should your cash balance be at a specific point in time? And then let's measure against that. Because at the end of the day, really the bank statement kind of is the ruling number. Like, who cares if it's on the income statement, on the balance sheet? Like, you need cash in the bank to pay the bills, to pay yourself.
I absolutely love what you just said. I hope people replay what you just said, and I'm going to just recap it. So having a process where all the cash in and out is allocated in the right place over time expands your freedom to do more with your time and more with your business. And in like practical ways, it gives yourself the ability to pay yourself more, plan for events, vacations, training, hiring, what level to hire, when to expand on, say, developing a website or doing PR or SEO, starting other kinds of businesses, or developing collections or different lines, what their dreams were. They can be more picky about the kind of clients they pick and how often they pick versus doing it on a panic. Answering some of these questions that are bigger for longer term planning. I noticed that people that have financial advisors really up level their business, and they have a different level of confidence, less stress, more energy. Because somebody, maybe meet with them monthly or something, and you see the processes that are in place that create that consistency of that financial wealth.
And to give you a tactical example of that, one, I think the processes and cleanliness of your financials are crucial. Second to that is building a reserve, meaning you've got cash in the business that you've already paid your taxes on, that's free and clear of any obligation. And then once you have, and it takes time, right? It probably takes a year's worth of time, maybe 6 months worth of time of working from a client from day one to when we've got 3 months worth of reserves, and that's operating expenses in the bank account. But what it allows them to do is, when you have that hiring decision or that opportunity to expand or want to take on or not take on clients, you've got a cushion there. And so I have a conversation recently with a client who wants to upgrade. They lost a junior designer and they want to upgrade to a senior designer, but we don't really have a full plate of work for that senior designer to have. Well, we got money in the reserves. And so as long as we can measure performance after the fact, after the hiring date, we can then, with a little less stress, make that hiring decision and then manifest that more work's coming in the door. And it tends to.
Yes. I see this all the time. The decision to grow is an invitation for bigger and better opportunities. Just think about this idea of having reserves for long term. I want our listeners to just think about what that means for them, is having someone on your side who is thinking about the long-term financial health and wealth of your business, so that you can do all the things that you want to do. I mean, for me, that is, you can just feel your brain like going to another level and taking your business to another level and thinking about what kinds of things that you get to do and think about to take your business to a new level.
Having that reserve or that security blanket is crucial. And I suspect that with the example that you were just describing, that client of yours, I suspect, had a reserve or a backup plan that allowed her to make that decision without saying, oh, I'm going to risk one business to build another.
Yes, you were absolutely right. She had the reserves in place because she's had this process in place to manage her finances, because she's always thinking about what money she needs for today, what income, what cash flow, what does she need for today, and what does she need to have reserves and to do the dreams that she wants to do in the future. So that's what I was saying kind of in the beginning of this, is there's such a difference between people who have someone who's helping them manage this over time, has the right process in place, so that those people are able to think about their dreams. They're able to have less stress and not just about the day-to-day kind of panic mode. I have a client who does this so well. She's buying a building because she knows she needs to have that kind of investment for her growth, to add more designers and have a nicer place for clients to come to. So I just love what you just said. It's an up leveling of a business, and it's super impactful.
Certainly. And the role that how I support my clients is, when those decisions come up now, it's an email or a phone call like, hey, Greg, I want to hire X person. Are we okay with that? Yeah, of course we are. Let's do it. Yes, and that's, I kind of drive from that, because I'm also a believer that it's not an all or nothing decision. We always have an opportunity to correct after the fact. You can let somebody go. You can work out a deal with your landlord. Like, there's things that we can do after the fact. But the key to it is having that initial decision-making process as risk-free as possible, or stress-free as possible. So you can do it. You can go for it.
Okay, so that's really good. So how do you know where to go to find funds that might become available?
There's an analysis that I do, and I call it the power of one, right? It's the power of 1%. And what we do is we look at our historical finances, both balance sheet and income statement, and then we run scenarios and say, you know what, if we would charge 1 percentage point higher pricing, what would that do for our income statement profit and our cash at the end of the day? Or what if we collected 1 percentage point more in client deposits when we took on an assignment? Or what if we collected a little bit better, or extended out our vendors a little bit further? And so we end up running through 6 or 7 scenarios, and that ultimately calculate, because it's all math. It all calculates to what your bottom line would look like and what the net cash difference would be in your bank account. So that's an exercise, and there's a spreadsheet I could share if anyone's interested in that. But what it does, it makes us focus on the parts of the business that have impact to what we're trying to achieve. Other things that we do, right? If we make an investment in SEO, for example, and let's say it's $1 a month we need to make in SEO, it's very easy to, like your Netflix account, it's very easy to put that $1 on your credit card, and it just gets rung up every month. And very rarely do we actually stop and look back and say, okay, well, do we have the revenue performance that we expected? Has the revenue truly increased over the last 6 months? Has the pipeline grown? And so having a systematic way of reviewing sort of those financial decisions, allows us to sharpen the pencil as we continue to move forward.
When you were doing this with your client, where do you find the most common discrepancies between what your client thought was the reality of their financial situation and what is the reality of their financial situation?
I find, and I do this in my own business too, so I got the shame shirt on as well, but I find that I justify expenses because with revenue. So if I wanted to do X in my business, I want to spend $10,000 to go to California to go network. And really it's a boondoggle. I will justify that. But the reality is I'm going out there to sip on wine and play golf. And it probably has so I don't have any true intention of growing my business. I'm just using that as an excuse to spend the money. And I get it, right? That's the beauty of having small businesses and being an entrepreneur, is we can live in that gray area. But the reality is that's hard cash out of your business that could have been used to grow your business, right? The return on investment in your business, and I've proven this over many different clients, is so great compared to other opportunities and other investments you have. It's like, why are we spending money on things that are boondogglish when we could be investing in marketing or sales or people or things that actually grow the organization?
That's really interesting, because what interior designers must do is nurture their creativity, stay inspired, and do things that really keep their craft at their best. And so that might look like a trip to meet with a lot of other interior designers that inspire you. Or I have a client, and every year she plans kind of a big event. When last year she went to France, she scheduled cooking with a chef in the Pyrenees Mountains for a week. Had nothing to do with interior design, but it just gave her the freedom to be creative and nurture her creativity. And so, but then you must spend the finances on, the practical things like staff and photo shoots and SEO and redesigning websites, planning for your future that way. So that's really interesting.
Absolutely. And the conversation I would be having with that client is, yes, you absolutely need that creativity and that energy jolt. But when we're analyzing your business, let's consider that to be more of an owner's distribution. Granted, we're still going to report it above the line for all the reporting reasons. But at the end, if we're just trying to look at the fundamental performance of the organization, of the business itself, I would most likely put that type of expense into an owner distribution. But it also makes you look at the business a little bit different. Am I taking out too much of my business instead of reinvesting? It's the start of a conversation, but that's how I would look at that situation and say, okay, yeah, I get it. And I do the same with my business.
What do you observe as designers' aha for when it's their first time to work with a financial advisor?
Yeah, so what comes to mind is the difference between running a business for a lifestyle, so a lifestyle business, right? Running a business in a way that gives you all the things that you want, or running a business to create wealth and accumulate wealth. And there's a huge fundamental difference between, having your shingle out, doing great design, delivering on a client, all those wonderful creative things is much different than running a business, right? Running a business, you've got to worry about employees, and you've got banking relationships, and you got credit cards to chase. And there's a management aspect to that is kind of ugly. I guess it's just a different side of the brain but as you grow, you naturally, as an entrepreneur, have to get into that management of people, management of vendors, there's that meat and potatoes of it. And so that's part of the journey as well. And that's something that I have been supporting my clients on. It's like, okay, if we want to change this from being you with your shingle with 3 or 4 clients and hoping things come in, great. If that's what you want to do and it's hitting your lifestyle, then wonderful. But if you're truly looking to, build a cash machine and, have a reserve and be able to hire employees, and maybe you do at some point need to bring in an operator to operate the business so you can stay as the creator. But again, that all should be sort of by design and not by gut feel.
That is such a valuable point. It's like having and using the financial data in a way that fits where you are with your career and your business in the moment and what you plan for the future. I work, just like to put this into practical terms, I work with clients that are in different situations. Some of them are younger. They want to build, expand, grow, hire, plan, add product lines. They're in this kind of grow, add. Then I have designers who are like kind of in the middle of their career, and they've done all the hard work. They've done the really hard stuff. They've been bottle washer, taking out the trash and doing all the design and showing up fabulous. And they want to do a lot more of the design work and have perhaps hire operational person so they don't have to do that. Then I have clients who are, I would say, toward they've been doing this for a long time. They're toward the end, and they're thinking about selling. They're thinking about they're selling their business. They're thinking about reducing the amount of time that they work and only do like the really, really good, juicy stuff, or maybe just do business development or just some high level design. And so I hear what you're saying. You utilize that data, that financial information, to do what is the best thing for the person that you're working with. I just love that.
Angela, and you touched on selling the business, and that's certainly a huge conversation and a broad topic. But one of the pieces of advice I would offer our audience is that as you think about selling your business, the further away that you are from driving revenue and delivering your service, the further away from that you are at the time of sale, the better the sale is going to be. Meaning, if you got the team in place and they really don't need you in the office every day anymore, you're going to have a better chance of selling that business versus if you're not in the office Monday morning to turn the lights on, the lights don't come on, right? And so I've had conversations around, hey, I want to sell this business in 5 years. I say, okay, well, if you're still taking out the trash and turning on the lights and returning all the phone calls, there's not a living organization behind you that's going to have a heartbeat when you decide to go do something else. And so it's an important concept to understand that really for somebody to be interested in buying your business, they need to be able to step into your shoes and it still runs the day after they bought it as if you were still running it.
Yes, this is such a good point. I am in the middle of working with somebody who does want to transition her business over to somebody else and sell it to her. And it's over a 2-year period. And so we've already hired somebody who's like a little mini her. And, that's what she wants to do. And so we're working on roles and responsibilities and this transition process, what the holes are, what needs to be filled, because she is a different person and has a different set of talents and skills. When people are ready to make a transition or to make a change, is that when they can start thinking about all of the things that they want to do and maybe even start doing them a little bit so they get that feeling and that experience, it's much easier to then start letting go. Like you said, you have to let go and let other people do these things while you're there so that when the transition happens, like finally, then everything's already ready, everything's already in place, and everything's already set. So it's just such a good point. I want to make a little shift here and ask a question about profit margins. What are your thoughts about profit margins? Because I have clients who are in the 8%, 10%, 15%, and even 22%. Huge variable. And I'm sure many people are below 8%, but I just want your take on that.
Yeah, and it's an awesome question. And it truly depends on your service / product mix, right? So if your majority of your revenue is purchases and procurement, you're going to have a different profit margin than if you were selling design services by yourself out of your house. I say my guidance tends to be, if you're ending up with like a 5% profit margin, you're really on the cusp of a 0% margin, right? You need a little bit more cushion there to just for your own sustainability. 10 to 15%, that's healthy for me. I'm a huge fan of that. Over like the 20% range, it's not that you're overcharging. That kind of invites competitors. And again, granted, our industry is very competitive. When you start clearing that 20% range, that's a very strong profit, and it can happen, over a short period of time. Usually, over the longer period of time, it's not as sustainable. The one caveat to all that, Angela, that it's important to make is how is the designer paying him or herself? So if you are running your income statement and you're only taking distributions, so that's below the net income line, your distribution is not in your income statement. And so you should be showing a very healthy profit margin. And so one of the things that I do with clients in that scenario is like, okay, I want your net income, but then I want to put your owner's distribution below your net income to show your retained earnings. Because sometimes we take out more money for ourselves than the business has generated. And that could be prior year capital that's accumulated or whatever the scenario is. But when we start talking about profit margins, we need to make sure that we're doing apples and apples. So the numbers that I'm talking about, that's truly after you've taken your distribution.
That's excellent.
Or to frame it differently, you've paid yourself a reason. So there's another concept I have. I believe that you should pay yourself a reasonable wage for the work that you're doing and pay yourself a dividend for the risk you're taking of being a business owner. And they're separate. And many of us combine them into one or take one big distribution and whatever else. And so when I try to look at the business, I say, okay, what would I pay him to do this role if it wasn't the business owner? And that's sort of the wage that needs to be above the line, above the net income line. And then everything else is distributions, it's risk taking. And it's an important concept to understand because again, if your wage out of your business is all distributions, you need to adjust for that when you're analyzing your income statement and your profitability. Because if you're making a 10% bottom line and you haven't paid yourself yet, you're probably in a negative situation.
And this way of operating a business is what feeds that nervousness, that stress, that walking around with such uncertainty.
It's very easy to forget about the distributions you had taken earlier in the year, right? And so my example would be, you get to April 15th and you got a tax payment. So you take your distribution from your business and then you're taking distributions across the year. As the business owner, you don't think about, oh, that's all in this calendar year's cash flow, but it is, depending on how you manage your cash. Many of the people I've worked with, you get to the end of the year and they're taking a distribution and they're like, wait a second, where'd all the money go? Well, you've been taking it out of the business for the last 9 months. I can show you where it's gone. And that's kind of the reality of reading the financial statements. It's like, truly, where did the money go? You started with $1, you earned $4, and you should have $5 left at the end of the year. And if you don't, it's leaking out somewhere else.
Wow, there is so much at what you just said. Where do I start? I want to talk about cash flow. It is what keeps people up at night. It is the major cause of panic and stress and decision making and how to take clients. So talk to us about cash flow, Greg. Just tell us all about it.
Absolutely. My healthiest clients from a cash perspective I've got one client that requires 100% of the client purchases upfront when they get going. So here's the proposal. You got to pay for everything. I'll keep it safe, and we do.
Yep.
I've worked with other businesses that have done the 50% or the 40-40-20, and I find that the client is most excited and most willing to let go of their money at the beginning. when they're visualizing the new home or the new interior or X. And so a best practice for me, it would be, if you can get 100%, go for it. Sometimes you get some pushback, and I understand why. But anything south of 80%, that's going to put you, it could put you in a situation where you're paying vendors with money that you haven't been collected. Yeah. And or you're building accounts receivables. And again, now you're the bank and you're sending out cash to make sure the vendors deliver on time, and you haven't been paid by your client. And that's going to just flip your cash flow in the wrong direction. And you're going to wonder at the end of the year, why have I made all this profit but no money? Well, it's because you're paying your vendors, but you haven't collected. And so another thing, and we all hate making those collection calls or following up with clients, because it's not the pretty side of the business, but it's crucial. Like, your clients need to be paying you for the work that you're doing, the value you're delivering, and the product that you're installing in their home or in their office. And it can't be you being the bank. We're too small of an industry to be the financiers of somebody else's design project.
Oh, I totally agree that designers do not need to be the bank.
You know, I mentioned earlier that I'm having my interior repainted, and the firm that we use are doing an amazing job. I'm really, really pleased. But when the guy came in to do the sales, and we were like looking at colors and whatever else, and he came up with a proposal, and I signed the proposal, they've required no money up front. In fact, I haven't paid them a dime, right? And they're going to finish today, maybe tomorrow. There's no way they can take this paint off the wall if I don't pay.
I know.
And it was just crawled under my skin. And granted, I was a salesperson, so it wasn't the owner. I wasn't going to give them that advice. But I also understand they want the sale, and it's much easier for them to get the sale without me stroking a check at signing of the agreement. I think that's one part of their psychology. And the other part is, once they're finished and this place looks like a brand new home, I'm going to be willing to write a check for any amount of money. Because like when it was just pale walls and no creativity, it's like, do I really want to live through this? But now it's like, wow, this is inspiring. And so I don't know.
That's a really interesting point. And that is also what happens is that if you do wait toward the end, if you're happy, it's easy to collect money. But if, somebody nicks the wall or nicks a piece of furniture and it needs to be repaired, or here's the big one, is it just didn't quite, they changed their vision. Now you're given a situation that's going to take more time, more money, more resources, if it's based on payment, based on how happy they are. So, and it's not like you're not going to make them, you're not going to solve their problem and make them happy when they give you the money in advance. Of course you're going to do it, but now it's not determined on whether you get the money or not, which you've already spent. Also, research shows that it's far easier to get payment from clients when they're happy. Designers know this, but what they don't know is it's easier to get it when it's connected with as soon as they make the decision to hire you. Because what's happening in their brains is they're deciding they're going to do this project. They know that it's going to cost them money. They're super happy about moving forward on the project. And all of those things are connected in their brain. And so it's easier for them to write a check. So on this point, here's a little tidbit of a story that's pretty powerful. I was working with a client. Her client happened to be a billionaire. They have lots of money. It's a big project. She asked for $400,000 to start. And then after about 3 weeks, she worked through all the purchases and went through that money. And it was coming to the next phase. She needed to ask for $500,000. And she felt really nervous about asking for that, really close to each other. That's almost $1 million. And so we talked about it. And what we found out was we talked about how this client operates, email, text. What we realized is she's very quick. She likes text. So we're trying to create something for the ask that is in line with how her client communicates. And so, but we started out with an email. It was kind of long, and it was, what we realized was that she actually felt far more uncomfortable herself about asking she thought that was really a lot of money. It is a lot of money, but for a billionaire, it's not really a lot of money, particularly since they, once again, agreed on the project, agreed on what the budget was. This was not out of budget. And so what we ended up with was a text, short and sweet. And within 24 hours, the money was transferred into her account. Oftentimes, it's more about us than it is about our clients. And we have to, I don't know, really think about that.
It's amazing how much head trash we put in when we're over analyzing what the other person's thinking, feeling, and trying to do.
Oh my gosh. I love that term, head trash. That's really good. Okay, let's change gears a little bit, because I know that you have helped a lot of designers with something called the employee tax retention credit. Is that still available? And you don't have to pay it back, right?
Yeah, in fact, I was working with a new designer client this morning on his application. So the employee retention tax credit is an IRS program that is related to COVID, like the other programs out there. But this is a refund from the payroll taxes that you've paid. And it's high level, we compare your 2019 performance to your 2020 performance on a quarter to quarter basis, and your 2019 to 2021. In 2019 to 2020, you could be eligible, if you've got a 50% decline, you could be eligible for $5,000 per W-2 employee that's a non-owner. And then there's some caveats in there that around PPP money and whatever else. But that's sort of the premise. And then also from the 2019 to 2021, if the decline is 20% or more, you're eligible for $7,000 per employee per quarter. So technically in 2021 to 19, you could be up to $28,000 per employee, assuming you've paid them that wage. And there's some caps and some other things. But I've got design clients that, have got an office of 10 and they're getting a $125,000 refund back. And so the process is you go through the calculations to see if you qualify. And most businesses do, especially in our industry, because we got demolished between 19 to 20 and 19 to 21. And then there's some caveats again around owner pay and wage and the PPP money. If you borrow PPP money, you can't pay a wage with PPP money and get a credit. And so there's some adjustments we make there. And then ultimately we file an amended 941 tax return, send that off to the IRS. It takes them about 6 months these days to process it. But I've got clients that I was working with in October, November, December, who are now getting their checks. And it's a huge relief. And it's, it takes the math is a little bit complicated and the rules are complicated, but it's one of those programs that, in fact, when I told my client this morning what his return's going to be, his refund's going to be, it blew him off his chair. I mean, these guys and girls have been struggling and have been retaining employees while the market's doing what it does and the supply chain's doing what it's doing, and we can't close out our projects and et cetera, et cetera. Here's an opportunity to get some capital back in your business.
Okay. So, wow, this has been so great. So let's ask one last question. Is there anything you want to leave people with before we go?
It's interesting, Angela. I see both of us in the coaching space. We just focus on different areas. And as I reflect coaching in my life, right, I've got an executive coach. I've got a triathlon coach. I've got, coaches that come in and out of my life whenever I need them. And I think what's happened over the industry, many of us have become specialized. And so I'm trying to build this niche in financial management coaching. And so I like to sit on the shoulder, read data, give encouragement, understand long-term plans, but that's my box. Like, I don't want to get into how you feeling and what about this and those types of things. Right? I just want to help you use your business to satisfy and meet your goals. It could be personal goals, it could be business goals, but again, it's all number driven. And where it all fundamentally boiled down to at the beginning of this, when I worked with my first design client, I said, you know what? Let's assume we closed your business today and you collected all the money you could and you paid out all the bills you you needed to, how much money would you have left as sort of a free cash balance? Um, and from there, we just started measuring that on a monthly basis or quarterly basis. And I think to the point, and it doesn't have to be that dramatic of an analysis, but having something that you're writing down or you have a goal towards or you're focused on in the finance arena will help you understand and dictate the fundamentals in your business. And so that's kind of, measure something, I guess, is the end of the answer to your question. Like, make a decision to start measuring something.
Yeah.
And then start projecting it and start manifesting it. Say, hey, I'm going to have a bank account of $4 in 6 months or whatever the case may be. But make it intentional versus just the gut feeling and going for it.
I really like your comments about the financial plan and having it be very intentional, because I think that's what, someone who hires a coach of any kind wants to have a life of living something very intentional, so that you are thinking about how to do all the things that you want to do. And so what I see out there a lot is that people are running so fast. They have a bookkeeper, they have a tax accountant, and then the financial advice part, they try to get that maybe from an accountant or their bookkeeper. And I would say that is not exactly the best plan.
Yeah, and just expand one little tidbit on that. Most bookkeepers won't give you that insight or that from that experience. And I bring a different experience because I have owned a business. And so I've been there when I needed to sign the front of the check and not the back of the check. It's hard, and put payroll on my credit card and those types of things. And your CPA, your tax accountant, the person that's doing the taxes at the end of the year or doing some quarterly filings, they are very transactional. They're going to take the data that you give them and put it on a government form and send it in and make sure you're in compliance. And that's a big job. That's a role. The bookkeeper on the other side of that is really making sure that when you send out a check, it gets put in the right bucket. And when you close out a project, it's completely closed out. If your expectation is to get business insights out of either one of those,
It's not there.
it could be there. And there are ones that I've dealt with that are there and translates it, right? Translates, understands the debits and credits, and how it rolls into the income statements and the balance sheet, but then translates that into business usefulness, right? How do you use that data? How do you build a reserve? When you got decisions coming up, are there certain things that you can look at to help you with those decisions? That's the coaching role that I try to live in. I relate it to, a client, an interior design client walks into a house or an office building and they see all the things that aren't in line, like the colors don't match, or the circle table should be a square, and this and that. And when I walk into a home or building, I don't see any of that.
Yeah.
But when I pull up a financial statement, all those things come right out to me. I love it.
That is such a great analogy. It's almost like you can't not see it, which is the same way they are too. I always love talking to you. I'm so grateful for your time and all of your tidbits and your advice. And, just even the way that listening to how you think about how you work with people is really helpful to like what we wanted to do in the beginning, was to really open the door and have people wonder and feel and look and see what it would be like if they had a financial advisor, and it wouldn't be so scary. And so I hope that's what we accomplished here today. So thank you so much. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for your time. And if you want to get a hold of Greg, I'll put his information up on the screen following this. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.